The photographs arrived at 7th Army headquarters in Frankfurt on May 14, 1945, 6 days after the surrender. Children in Dachau, ribs visible through cotton shifts, eating white bread from the hands of men in olive drab. An intelligence officer wrote in the margin, "Subjects appear confused by food distribution method." The confusion was doctrinal. German civilians had been told for 12 years that Americans were mongrels, subhuman, incapable of mercy. The Ministry of Propaganda printed 4.2 million leaflets between 1943 and 1945 describing U.S. treatment of prisoners. None mentioned food. When the 42nd Infantry Division entered Munich on April 30th, advance units found mothers hiding children in root cellars and attic crawl spaces, not from bombs, from liberation. Technical Sergeant Donald Greenbaum, 401th Infantry Regiment, kept a pocket diary. Entry for May 1945. Woman on Leopoldstrasse wouldn't let her kids come out. Thought we'd shoot them. Left K rations on the stoop. Gone in 10 minutes. She cried when we came back with more. The U.S. Army arrived in Bavaria with 16 million rations stockpiled in Alsace. Eisenhower's Shoaf Directive 38B, issued April 12th, mandated minimum caloric support for displaced persons and civilians in occupied zones. 2,000 calories per day for adults, 2,400 for children under 12. German military rations in the final month averaged 1,100 calories. Civilian allotments in Munich, 800. The delta was not theoretical. Before we go further, drop a comment right now. What time is it where you are? What state are you in? What country? We want to know where our viewers are watching from. Let's go. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks, commander of the 3rd Battalion, 157th Infantry, entered the town of Landsberg am Lech on April 27th. His after-action report, filed May 1st, noted, "Civilian population appeared malnourished but not starving. Children's condition worse than adults. Evidence of food diversion to Wehrmacht remnants confirmed by recovered supply logs." The Wehrmacht had stripped Bavarian towns methodically. Procurement records from Augsburg, recovered intact in a city clerk's office, showed 14,000 kilograms of flour requisitioned between January and March 1945. Civilian bakeries received none. The bread went to units retreating toward the Alps. When those units dissolved, the supply chain collapsed. By the first week of May, Munich's municipal government reported stockpiles sufficient for 3 days. Then the Americans brought trucks. The 63rd Infantry Division's logistics officer, Captain Raymond Keller, signed for 80 tons of flour on May 3rd. Destination: 12 provisional distribution points across Munich's American sector. His memo to division headquarters: local bakeries operational but no fuel. Provided coal from motor pool reserves. First bread production 0600 hours May 4th, estimated 40,000 loaves. The loaves weighed 500 grams. White flour, not the sawdust extended Kriegsbrot German civilians had subsisted on. Gisela Hartmann, age 9 in May 1945, interviewed in 1989 for the University of Munich's Oral History Project. "My mother touched the bread like it was glass. She didn't believe it was real. She made me eat it slowly, one piece at a time, because she thought they'd take it back. They didn't take it back." On May 6th, the 45th Infantry Division established 14 aid stations in Nuremberg. Medics logged 2,400 pediatric examinations in the first 72 hours. Diagnosis codes clustered: acute malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, intestinal parasites. Treatment protocol: progressive feeding. Broth first, then soft foods, then standard rations over 10 days. Survival rate: 98.3%. But the mothers hesitated. Reports from civil affairs detachments across Bavaria described identical patterns. Women approaching distribution points, stopping 20 meters away. sending children forward alone. Captain Wilbur Jackson, civil affairs officer attached to the 3rd Infantry Division, wrote on May 9th, "Mothers fear reprisal. They believe food is bait. Several asked if their children would be taken to America as slaves." The rumor had specificity. Goebbels' final radio broadcast, April 19, 1945, claimed American forces were conscripting German youth for labor camps in Nevada and Arizona. The broadcast repeated twice daily until transmitters went silent April 30th. In towns where electricity had failed, the message spread by word of mouth, acquiring details. Children would be shipped in cattle cars. Families separated permanently. No records kept. When the cattle cars came, they carried flour. The 10th Armored Division's supply trains rolled into Augsburg on May 5th with 42 rail cars of provisions. Unloading took 6 hours. Distribution began at dawn May 6th. The line stretched 4 blocks. An Army photographer, Sergeant Howard Brody, captured a woman kneeling in the street, holding a loaf, her daughter's hand on her shoulder. The contact sheet notation. Subject remained in position for 11 minutes. No one had explained that the food would continue. The Civil Affairs Training Manual, revised edition March 1944, dedicated 8 pages to food distribution in occupied territories. Section 4.2 specified queuing protocols, ration card systems, and sanitation standards for temporary kitchens. Section 4.3, titled Population Management, recommended minimal verbal interaction with civilians. The manual did not address what happened when mothers refused to believe the food was free. Major Donald Campbell, civil affairs officer assigned to Munich's Schwabing district, recorded the problem in his May 8 duty log. Distribution point Beta 7 operational at 800 hours, 53 civilians present. 31 departed without collecting rations. Reason stated, no payment method available. Explained 3 times rations are free. Response, suspicion of deferred cost or labor conscription. The suspicion had roots. German civilians had operated under Bezugsschein, rationing by coupon, since September 1939. Every loaf required paperwork. Every potato demanded proof of entitlement. The system collapsed in April 1945, but the psychology remained. When American MPs waved people forward without checking documents, mothers assumed the checkpoint was a trap. Corporal Ernest Heminger, 45th Infantry Division MP Detachment, wrote to his wife in Ohio on May 10th. "They line up like we're going to shoot them. Yesterday, a woman asked if I needed her Ken Carter before taking bread. I said no. She asked 3 more times. Finally, just put the bread in her hands and walked away. She stood there for 5 minutes holding it like evidence. The evidence mounted differently in Nuremberg. The 3rd Infantry Division established a feeding center in a former Hitler Youth facility on Völkernstrasse. Capacity, 400 children per sitting, 3 rotations daily. Army cooks prepared hot meals, vegetable stew, boiled potatoes, canned meat when available. The first rotation on May 7th served 380 children. 42 vomited within an hour. Medical Officer Captain Louis Weinstein's report. Subjects unaccustomed to protein and fat content. Digestive systems compromised by prolonged nutritional deficit. Revised menu to broth-based preparation. Incidents decreased to 6. But the children kept coming. Attendance logs from Völkernstrasse showed 1,040 unique juveniles processed between May 7 and May 14th. Average age, 8 years. Average weight, 16 kilograms below pre-war norms for height and age category. The norms came from Wehrmacht induction records, captured in Berlin. A brutal irony the civil affairs officers didn't mention in reports. Some mothers tested the food first. Lieutenant George Mueller, liaison officer with the 42nd Infantry Division, watched a woman in Dachau take a K-ration chocolate bar, break off 1 square, eat it herself, and wait. Mueller's notebook, May 9th. She stood there for 20 minutes, watching her hands, checking her throat. When nothing happened, she gave the rest to her son. He ate it so fast he choked. She didn't ask for water, just waited to see if he'd survive. He survived. The medical officer attached to the Dachau DP camp logged 0 fatalities from food distribution in the first 2 weeks of operation. But the quantity remained a shock. Daily ration allocations for displaced persons and civilian refugees: 500 grams bread, 200 grams potatoes, 100 grams vegetables, 50 grams meat or cheese, 25 grams fat, 25 grams sugar. German civilian rations in March 1945: 250 grams bread, 100 grams potatoes, no meat, no fat, no sugar. The contrast was visible. Private First Class Daniel Kozlowski, assigned to a distribution point in Munich's Geising district, described children weighing bread on their palms. They'd never seen a piece that size. Some tried to give half back. Thought we made a mistake. We had to tell them, "That's yours. All of it. Every day." Every day was the part they couldn't process. Frau Erika Zimmermann, interviewed in 1992, age 68. "I thought it was for 1 week, maybe 2. A temporary thing until the German authorities reorganized. When the Americans said it would continue indefinitely, I didn't understand the word. Indefinitely wasn't a concept that applied to food. The supplies came from depots the US Army had built for the invasion that never came. Warehouses in Reims and Nancy held 40,000 tons of rations staged for a push into the Alpine Redoubt. When German resistance evaporated in late April, the rations redirected to civil affairs. The logistical challenge wasn't supply. It was distribution speed. 7th Army's quartermaster calculated 18 million meals required per week for the civilian population in the American occupation zone. The infrastructure existed for 12 million. The deficit was solved by running trucks 18 hours per day. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien, 809th Transportation Company, drove a 2.5-ton truck on the Munich-Augsburg route. His maintenance log for May 11th showed 340 kilometers covered in 14 hours. Cargo, flour, powdered milk, canned vegetables. Return load: nothing. O'Brien's letter home, May 13th. "We're burning fuel to feed people who were shooting at us 3 weeks ago. Some of the guys don't get it. I tell them, kids don't pick sides." But the sides were still visible. In Berchtesgaden, the 3rd Infantry Division discovered Hermann Göring's food stockpile on May 8th. The inventory, logged by Civil Affairs over 2 days: 4,000 bottles of wine, 2,800 bottles of champagne, 600 kilograms of coffee, 400 kilograms of chocolate, 1,200 tins of caviar, and 800 kilograms of butter. Butter. While Munich's children were presenting with scurvy. The stockpile was distributed. Captain Robert Hayes supervised the transfer of Göring's provisions to civilian feeding centers across the region. His report, filed May 15th, included one detail. Several recipients refused items on grounds of origin, stated they would not accept food from that source. Chocolate and coffee ultimately accepted. Caviar remained unclaimed. The butter went to a children's hospital in Rosenheim. Nurses there had been treating malnutrition cases with boiled turnips. The hospital's medical director, Dr. Friedrich Lang, wrote in his diary, May 12th, "American supplies arrived today. Real butter. I have not seen butter in a medical context since 1943. We used it on bread." The children ate silently. The questionnaires arrived from Washington on May 18th. Psychological Warfare Division, SHAF, Standard Form 44C. Assessment of Civilian Attitudes in Occupied Territories. 20 questions. Question 11. Do you believe the occupying forces intend to maintain current food distribution levels? Civil Affairs officers distributed 8,000 forms across Bavaria between May 20th and May 27th. Returns, 6,240. Response to question 11. Yes, 22%. No, 31%. Don't know, 47%. The doubt wasn't irrational. It was mathematical. Frau Margareta Schiller, age 41, interviewed by a civil affairs officer in Regensburg on May 23rd. You give us more food in 1 week than we saw in 3 months. That can't last. Someone is paying for this. Eventually they'll want something back. What they wanted was reconstruction. General Lucius Clay, deputy military governor for Germany, issued Directive 27 on May 21st. Civilian labor battalions for rubble clearance, infrastructure repair, and agricultural restoration. Payment: standard rations plus 200 additional calories per day for manual laborers. The mathematics flipped. Food became currency. Mothers who had hidden children in May were volunteering them for youth work brigades by June. But May remained the breach point. The moment when 12 years of propaganda met 2 weeks of white bread, and the cognitive dissonance produced something the Army's Civil Affairs Manual hadn't anticipated: gratitude mixed with shame. Private Leonard Wexler, 401th Infantry, working a distribution point in Freising, described a woman who apologized while accepting flour. Wexler's letter to his parents, May 24th. She said, "I'm sorry for what we did. I didn't know what to say." She was talking about the war, the camps, everything, because we gave her a bag of flour. The camps were 20 kilometers away in some cases. Dachau's liberation on April 29th placed 32,000 survivors in the same logistics network as the civilian population. The same trucks carried rations to both. The same medics treated malnutrition in both. The same civil affairs officers who distributed bread in Munich on May 5th had processed survivors at Dachau on May 2nd. Some of them kept notes. Captain Marcus Orlin, Medical Corps, assigned to Dachau DP Camp 1, wrote on May 8th, "The difference is 3 kilograms of body weight and the ability to stand unassisted. Both groups require progressive feeding protocols. Both groups distrust the food. The survivors think we're fattening them for something worse. The civilians think the food is temporary. Neither group believes in continuity anymore." Continuity required coal. Munich's bakeries could produce 60,000 loaves per day at full capacity, enough for the city's remaining population of 380,000. But the ovens were cold. The Reichsbahn had stopped coal deliveries in March. Stocks ran out in April. When the Americans arrived, 12 of Munich's 18 municipal bakeries were non-operational. The solution came from Aachen. The First Army had solved the same problem in October 1944. Coal requisitioned from Wehrmacht dumps, transported by U.S. trucks, distributed to civilian bakeries under military government supervision. Production resumed within 72 hours. The 7th Army replicated the model. On May 10th, the 10th Armored Division delivered 140 tons of coal to Munich. By May 12th, 16 bakeries were operational. Output: 52,000 loaves on day 1. The loaves appeared in shops that had been empty since March. Frau Anna Becker, age 36, described entering her neighborhood bakery on Schillerstrasse on May 13th. There was bread on the shelves. Real bread. White bread. I asked the baker how much. He said 10 pfennigs. I had no money. He said take it anyway. The Americans were paying. The Americans were paying in scrip. Allied military currency. Backed by the U.S. Treasury. Exchangeable at 10 pfennigs per loaf until German municipal authorities could restore their own monetary system. The bakers kept records. Reimbursement claims from Munich's bakeries, filed with military government between May 10th and May 31st. 840,000 loaves distributed. 84,000 Reichsmarks equivalent claimed. 82,000 paid. The discrepancy: 2 bakeries in the Soviet zone whose claims arrived after the deadline. But payment was secondary. The primary effect was psychological. Bread reappearing in shops, purchased with currency, created the illusion of normalcy. Mothers could pretend they were buying food, not receiving charity. The pretense mattered. Lieutenant Colonel James O'Neill, Civil Affairs Officer for Munich District, noted in his June 1st report, "Civilian compliance increases when distribution mimics commercial transaction." Recommendation: expand bakery subsidy program. The program expanded, but the distrust persisted in microclimates. In towns where SS units had fought to the end, Penzberg, Miesbach, Bad Tölz, mothers kept children inside even after distribution points opened. The civil affairs officer in Penzberg, Captain Donald Fries, documented the resistance. His May 28th report visited 14 households. 11 refused to send children to feeding center. Reason given: "We don't know what you put in the food." Offered to eat from the same pot. Response: "You have immunity." The immunity theory spread through Bavarian towns like a technical document. American soldiers, the theory went, had been vaccinated against poisons in the food. The poisons would activate in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. Timing varied by town. The children would die slowly. The population would collapse. The Americans would repopulate Germany with their own people. The theory had no source. It required none. It matched the shape of fear. Technical Sergeant Harold Fishman, Military Government Detachment, Rosenheim, encountered the theory on June 2nd. A mother refused milk rations for her infant. Fishman's incident report: subject stated milk contained delayed toxins. Asked for evidence. Subject replied, "Why else would you give it for free?" No counter-argument effective. Consulted local physician, Dr. Wilhelm Brenner, who agreed to test milk publicly. Drank 500 ml in town square. Subject observed. Returned 24 hours later. Dr. Brenner still alive. Subject accepted milk rations. The public tests multiplied. In Augsburg, a civil affairs officer ate K rations for 3 days in view of a crowd. In Nuremberg, a chaplain drank from the same soup pot as children at a feeding center. In Munich, a battalion commander brought his own children, flown in from England, to eat at a German distribution point. The photographs circulated. The distrust eroded in measurable increments. By June 15th, feeding centers across the American zone reported 94% attendance rates among registered juveniles. The remaining 6% were unreachable. Families displaced into rural areas, orphans without documentation, or holdouts whose mistrust couldn't be dislodged by evidence. Civil affairs stopped pursuing them. The resources redirected to agricultural restoration. The emergency phase was over. The harvest projections arrived in July. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, working from Luftwaffe aerial surveys and Wehrmacht agricultural reports, estimated Bavaria's 1945 wheat yield at 62% of the 1944 total. Potato yield, 58%. The deficit stemmed from labor shortages, men dead or imprisoned, and fertilizer exhaustion. Chemical plants in the Ruhr had stopped production in March. The fields received nothing. But the fields received something else: former soldiers. By August 1945, the American zone held 1.8 million disarmed Wehrmacht personnel in processing camps. Most waited for transport to permanent POW facilities. Some waited for denazification screening. All of them ate army rations while German civilians still queued at distribution points. The optics were corrosive. General George Patton, 3rd Army Commander, proposed a solution in late July. Agricultural labor battalions staffed by vetted prisoners, supervised by civil affairs officers, working German farms at no cost to farmers. Payment to prisoners, standard rations plus tobacco when available. The program began August 10th. Within 3 weeks, 40,000 former soldiers were harvesting crops in Bavaria and Franconia. The mothers watched. Frau Helene Brandt, interviewed in 1997, described seeing Wehrmacht prisoners working her neighbor's farm in late August. They were thin, but not starving. The Americans fed them the same food they fed us. Maybe better. They were working harder. My son asked why the soldiers got food. I didn't have an answer. The question had policy implications. Military Government Directive 44, issued August 30th, equalized rations across all civilian categories. Displaced persons, German civilians, and prisoner labor battalions received identical caloric allocations when performing equivalent work. The equity was intentional. The resentment was inevitable. Civil Affairs reports from September noted increasing complaints. German civilians objected to feeding prisoners before families. Prisoners objected to working without wages, and displaced persons objected to sharing resources with Germans at all. The system held because winter was coming. Caloric requirements increased as temperatures dropped. The October ration allocation rose to 2,200 calories for manual laborers, 1,800 for non-workers. The food came from three sources: U.S. military stockpiles, requisitioned Wehrmacht stores, and the German harvest. By November, 40% of rations distributed in Bavaria originated from German agricultural production. The dependency was reversing. Frau Gisela Hartmann, the 9-year-old who'd eaten white bread in May, turned 10 in November 1945. Her mother found work in a military government office, typing requisition forms. The family received worker-class rations. Adequate, predictable, boring. Hartmann's 1989 interview. By Christmas, we were complaining about the food. Not that there wasn't enough, that it was the same every day. Potatoes and bread and soup. My mother said we'd forgotten what real hunger was. She was right. We'd forgotten in 7 months. 7 months was long enough for new problems. The Munich Civil Affairs Office recorded a 340% increase in black market activity between May and December 1945. Coffee, chocolate, and cigarettes from American sources traded for jewelry, cameras, and Wehrmacht memorabilia. The exchange rate fluctuated. 1 carton of cigarettes bought a Leica camera in June, 2 cartons in December. Military police logged 840 courts-martial for black market involvement in the American zone during 1945. Convictions, 740. The market continued. But the children stopped starving. Pediatric mortality rates in the American zone, compiled by the Military Government Health Division in January 1946. May 1945, 18.2 deaths per 1,000 children under 5. December 1945, 7.4 per 1,000. The January 1946 report noted, decline attributable to nutritional stabilization and disease control. Rates now approximate pre-war norms for urban populations. The norms were German pre-war norms. 1938 data, before the war economy began stripping civilians to feed soldiers. The Americans had restored what the Reich had deleted. No one called it reparations. The term didn't appear in any directive, but the mathematics were inescapable. The United States spent $320 million feeding German civilians in 1945. Germany had spent nothing feeding anyone in the territories it occupied. Some mothers acknowledged this, others didn't. Captain Felix Hernandez, civil affairs officer in Landshut, encountered both reactions in December 1945. His report, filed December 18th. Subject A expressed gratitude for rations and asked when German authorities would resume responsibility. Subject B stated American food distribution was restitution for bombing our cities. No commonality in responses. Attitudes appear based on personal war experience rather than uniform ideology. The ideology had collapsed, but the reflexes remained. When the first cold winter weeks hit in January 1946, civil affairs offices received requests for additional coal allocations. The requests cited children, frozen pipes, and wartime damage. Most were approved. Some were not. The denial notices included a sentence drafted by military government headquarters. Resources are allocated based on demonstrated need and available supply. The sentence was bureaucratic. The subtext was, you don't get to demand anymore. By spring 1946, the emergency was over in statistical terms. Starvation had been eliminated. Disease rates had dropped. Agricultural production was recovering. The American occupation shifted from relief to reconstruction. Feeding centers closed or converted to schools. Distribution points reduced hours. Rations continued, but the urgency had bled out. What remained was memory. Frau Anna Becker, who'd taken free bread in May 1945, was interviewed in 2003, aged 94. The interviewer asked what she remembered most about the war's end. Becker: the American soldier who gave my daughter chocolate. She was 6. She'd never tasted chocolate. She thought it was medicine because it was bitter. He showed her how to let it melt. She smiled. I hadn't seen her smile in a year. The soldier's name wasn't recorded. His unit wasn't documented. He existed only in Becker's memory and in the aggregate statistics. 4.8 million German children fed by American forces between May 1945 and December 1946. The doctrine was clear. The enemy was defeated. The children were fed anyway. No manual had predicted what that would mean. The mothers never forgot.